Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special episode of Radio Offside. I'm very excited to be with our guest today. He is a senior reporter for Football.London and has previously worked for the London Evening Standard. It is an utmost honor to introduce James Benge. James, welcome to our pod.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
How have you been dealing and coping with all the chaos and news?
It has been very strange. I mean, I don't think anyone's sort of lived through a period of time quite like this. I think best thing to do is to try and keep your mind occupied, try and keep yourself physically active as much as possible. And it has been very strange though. I could never have imagined going so long without football. Very odd times.
It is, yeah. It feels like we're living in one of those apocalyptic movies.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very weird. Yeah. So, talking about the outbreak, how has it affected the league? I mean, there has been a lot of speculations about what's going to happen next with football and the league this season. What do you think is going to happen? What will be the outcome?
I mean, the honest answer is I don't know. I don't really think anyone knows, including the league itself, because in the UK the situation is so fluid. I mean, Boris Johnson on Friday closed the pubs, basically closed pubs and restaurants, and then Monday we're all in lockdown. It has changed remarkably quickly, and I mean it could, when we know. We've got a rough idea, at least, that it'll be 3 weeks before people are able to, or before the government will even consider people being out and about as usual. So obviously, football is a long way off happening yet. We know that not until April the 30th, at the earliest, that the league will resume. Everything I've heard makes me think that date is again another placeholder date, and that there's no guarantees it will take place then, but we'll see what happens and how effective the government's lockdown is. There's still a real will to finish the season. I think that's generally shared by everyone. Obviously, West Ham came out or Karen Brady came out and probably did herself and West Ham and the whole case for vetoing the season, declaring it null and void. No real favours by the way she got her message across in the Sun. I think most teams obviously there's a part of them that's the self-interest side that a team like Arsenal might think actually best thing for us to do is write this whole season off and act like it never happened. But then you have a very awkward conversation with your broadcast partners about what they are paying for and what they have paid for. So I think there's a general acceptance within the Premier League that the show kind of has to go on at some stage. I mean, we're almost certainly talking something that goes into the summer with the 2020-2021 season happening later. I mean, underlying all this, even if things get back to normal in England, in the US, in Canada, around the world, there is the possibility as well that this virus comes back next summer and that, 2021 itself, we're still being affected by it then. So I expect an awful lot of fluidity. The simple answer is no one really knows what will happen, but there's a will at least to get this season finished.
Yeah, I was even reading something about having games played at venues which are farther away from centers with a lot of infection, which I don't think would be possible to like smaller cities or something like that.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, there's so many options, and I think they're almost at the stage where there's nothing that's too crazy to not at least consider, whether it's playing behind closed doors, playing in a different country. I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, the Premier League has previously had a desire to go and take these games around the world. Now, if the situation in China and the Far East were to ease, as it looks like it is, and for that to hold, we don't really know. That's a possibility. It would be quite a contentious one, but it's one that's worthy of exploring. And I think, the honest answer is no one knows, but we're kind of at that stage where if you've got a plan, let's just talk it through, talk it over conference calls and all that. Obviously, the Premier League executives, they can all talk to each other very easily. And I'm sure there are an awful lot of weird and wacky ideas being thrown into the mix.
Yeah. And you talked about the lockdown now that is happening at the UK, and it's going to affect a lot of local communities. And are the London clubs taking any actions towards supporting the local communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just getting up some notes here that I was sent by Arsenal today. Obviously, the club I predominantly cover. I mean, they're giving 100,000 to local charities, 50,000 to the Islington Givings Crisis Fund, and then also, and I think this is quite important, is making use of the resources they have and directing them to clubs, sorry, not to clubs, to the NHS in particular, to primary schools, to places that need it. So you've got club cars and staff volunteering to drive the NHS staff around. Resources being made available for those kids that are still in school. Arsenal do what they can. There's credit as well, I think, to Chelsea. Their owner Roman Abramovich has basically opened up the hotel on site, the Millennium Hotel at Stamford Bridge, and made that available to NHS workers. Clubs are doing what they can. They're making sure as well that the sort of casual match day staff, Arsenal have said, and Man United, other clubs, Brighton, have said that they'll pay those staff for any games they miss. So yeah, they're doing what they can. I think there's a broader question that will be asked at some stage about the fact that players are still being paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a week. And so you look at the 100,000 Arsenal are donating to local charities and you think, well, that's 2 days' wages for Mesut Ozil, or half a week's wages for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Is there more that could be done? I do think so, personally. I don't think that means that the clubs don't deserve credit for what they are doing, but these are multi-million-pound institutions, and to be frank, some of them haven't really done enough yet. I mean, I'm not going to name specific clubs, but there are some that are even refusing to confirm whether they're paying, match day staff who let's be honest, keep the game going and are crucial parts of the community. So there's always more that can be done. I think, though, that at the moment, at least, there are clubs that are doing the right thing by the game. And doing the right thing for their local community, which is always encouraging to see.
Yeah, and I really liked the statement from Arsenal that they said that they will be paying their match day and non-match day staff. That was a very great move. So moving forward, go.
It's not a cheap thing. I was told it would be the cost would run into the hundreds of thousands of pounds. Again, though, that's not cheap, but it's not beyond the means of a club like Arsenal to pay that.
Yeah, exactly. So moving forward, let's talk about Arsenal a little bit now. So I'm just going to start with a very general question. How have you seen Arteta's short spell at Arsenal
I think it's been really encouraging. I think you're seeing him improve some of the biggest problems in the squad. I mean, under Unai Emery, that defence and the midfield that protected the defence was absolutely porous. I mean, there were games where Arsenal were sort of massively outdoing their own XG, and then their XG against was very much, it spoke to a lot of lucky draws and a lot of lucky victories. And he started to solve that. He's given the defence a more solid base in front of them. I mean, it's quite rare now that you see an opponent counter-attacking and they're running into a lot of space and it's only Granit Xhaka or only one of the midfielder protecting the defence. There's a lot of drilling discipline. You can see these patterns of play being built, whether it's things like Xhaka drifting into left back to free up the left back to bomb on, or whether it's some of the interplay down the right. The idea of having one of the fullbacks tuck inside, so that you can see there's a plan there. There's an identity. I think obviously that there are always fans that aren't happy with their lot and expect a lot from Arsenal, which they absolutely should. But I think you've got to realise that what Arteta was handed here was a squad that there's a lot of very talented individuals in there, but it was really, really badly put together in a lot of key positions. The obvious one there is that there were 6 centre-backs at the club in January, and not one of them was left-footed. Like, it's not. I don't really understand how you build a squad in that way. The same with, you have a midfield where a lot of them look more comfortable playing in a 4-2-3-1, but you've kind of built the attack to play a 4-3-3 with Aubameyang and Pepe wide and Lacazette through the middle. I think a lot of people will tend to blame Raul Sanllehi for that, and I think there's sort of questions to be answered. But even then, a lot of he's almost been building on the fly. It was, very frustrating the way that Arsenal lost their captains as well. There's still a void of leadership in that squad, which Arteta will look to address. But you don't have high quality people in the dressing room like Arteta himself was. As I say, they're going in the right direction. They're going quite slowly, and they're starting from quite a long way behind. But they are at least moving in the direction you'd want them to, and I think that's progress.
Yeah. So that was a very comprehensive answer and touched on some of my questions that I had. So I'm just going to bring those up. So you mentioned Raul Sanllehi. Do you think the board in general, so Sanllehi, Edu, and all those people who are involved in recruitment, and then if you go one tier up, the Chrome case, do you think they have the intention of building a squad that can contend for the Premier League?
Yes, I think they do. Mm-hmm. I think it can be quite hard to see that, and I'm not sure I'm not sure that Sanllehi has set the world alight since his appointment. I think it's also important to bear this in mind. Everything that has happened at Arsenal over recent years all has to be seen, and this is not a criticism of Ozil, but it all has to be seen through the prism of that Mesut Ozil contract and the Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan contracts that came with them. Immediately, Arsenal blew their wage budget apart. All a sort of desperate attempt to get in the Champions League hasn't worked. And, that has financially, it has seriously hamstrung Arsenal, not being in the Champions League whilst paying these big Champions League wages. I remember talking to Josh Kroenke about this in the summer, and it was a point he really hammered home to us. This is a club that is paying Champions League money to its players and is not getting Champions League football. Probably won't get it next season either. So it is difficult. There is not the money there, to radically overhaul the squad. Obviously, there have been some really good deals done, and Sanllehi has proven quite capable when it comes to negotiating new signings. Someone like Pepe, a deal that kind of we were being told from within Arsenal didn't think they could do. Sanllehi got it done. I think part of that also, I've never been able to confirm this, but from one source being told that there was some support from ownership there, that what they could offer. It's important to remember that, the vision that Stan and Josh Kroenke have had for this club is put good people in place and let them get on with their job. They know that they're not experts in football. I think for a long time they let their focus drift away. And Stan Kroenke's focus is not on Arsenal. Arsenal fans just have to accept that. Josh is very different. Josh is a regular. I mean, I see him quite often now at the Emirates Stadium. We don't chat very much, but I do see him quite often. He is regularly here. My suspicion is he will be becoming more and more involved. He obviously has the Denver Nuggets as well out in the States, but he will be more involved, more hands-on, because I think there is an acceptance that they just allowed things to drift by not being there, by not holding people to the fire and demanding more. I think a lot of this comes down to the way Ivan Gazidis managed the club. Not a hugely popular leader, not a hugely effective leader. Under him, the commercial department, he was supposed to be a business guy. Under him, the commercial department went backwards. Under him, contracts were continually mismanaged. And these things don't just solve themselves overnight. He was, in the end, he was the one that rubber stamped that deal for Ozil. It depends who you ask whether Sanllehi or Wenger were in favour of it. But in the end, he was the chief executive who signed off on that. A lot of this is still about kind of sifting through the mess that Ivan Gazidis left behind. Sanllehi's been in the job, 18 months now? For a chief executive, this is not a huge amount of time. I think he is now kind of on the clock. And I think he has, starting next summer, the Ozil deal is gone. Maybe Ozil is or isn't, but the Ozil deal, in the summer of 2021 comes off the books, and there's a little bit more flexibility. And I think that's when expectations for him should really ratchet up. But I think there's got to be a degree of remembering what it was that that Sanye and Vinay Venkatesham were handed, without any notice, it just almost completely at random. I still think if I were blaming anyone for the problems at Arsenal, it's still Ivan Gazidis.
Yeah, I do agree with that too, and I think the way he's been managing AC Milan, and then what he's been doing there is just a proof of how bad things were when he was at Arsenal.
Exactly.
So going back to how Arteta's tactics have been encouraging for us this season, or at the short spell that he's had, do you think he'd be able to achieve anything big with the current squad?
I think he could get in the top 4 and win a trophy. Win the FA Cup, it's big. Win the Europa League, obviously not this season, but win the FA Cup would be big. I do think, though, that squad just has real talent, but it also has real holes in it as well. I think that you need to upgrade at centre-back. Maybe Saliba's the man, but I'm sure he's not going to be the man right away. You need at least one better midfielder. I think you could make a case that none of those midfielders get into a team that competes for the title. The same as well at the sort of number 10 creative position. It needs a bit more quality out wide. It needs experience. All those things. I think there was a bit too much of a rush to cut some of the older players out of the squad. I think you can achieve a bit with it. I think it's still probably the 4th or 5th best squad in the country, but it's miles off Liverpool, miles and miles and miles. Same with Man City. It is on the sort of level of Leicester, Chelsea, Tottenham. Probably not even Chelsea. Leicester, Tottenham, Man United. All of those have good players and some players that just aren't up to the level.
Yeah. So I also wanted to talk about incomings and outgoings. Do you have any news about people who Arsenal might be signing in the summer, or thinking of signing, looking for? I know it's just too early, but
so early.
Yeah,
so early. And the thing with Arsenal is always that it depends on Champions League qualification. Mm-hmm. If that money's there, then you look at a different class of player. Having said that, they are going to look at midfield, strengthening there. I think it was David Ornstein said first that they'll be looking for a sort of 6, someone with a bit of energy, who's strong in the tackle, physically a bit better cut out for the Premier League. I don't know who that player is, and I don't know if they know who that player is. There's also there's the situation up front. I think there's a desire to get in another young player. I don't know whether this will happen this summer or in the future, who can be your sort of long-term successor for Aubameyang and Lacazette. Lacazette is 29 in May, I think, and Aubameyang is 31 in June. So even if one or both of them sign new contracts, this is their final years at the peak in theory. So 2 names I am aware of: Jonathan David at Genk or Ghent, I'm never sure which one, and Odsonne Edouard at Celtic. And they are 2 players that Arsenal have been scouting extensively. That doesn't mean they're going to sign them. It just means that they're players they've watched a lot, and I suspect they would be on their short lists, wish lists, whatever you want to call it. David, there's a sort of sense that from his camp that maybe a move to Germany would be a better step now, and that he can always move to Arsenal. The thing for Arsenal, though, is that someone like Jonathan David, they want to get him before he goes to Germany. If Jonathan David goes and signs for RB Leipzig, Schalke, Borussia Dortmund, or whoever, they'll say £50 million to even start talks. You go to Ghent now, you get him for 20. Same with Edouard. I think he's been Leicester and Everton have looked at him. Celtic might let him go for 30. I'm speculating here. If he goes to another Premier League club or goes to Lyon, like Moussa Dembele did, then that's £50 million. It's a major investment. So I think what I can say is that Arsenal's strategic priority is getting these players before they go to the sort of next tier, next time they sign a player like Nicolas Pepe, they don't want to sign him from Lille. They want to sign him from Angers. I think that was Angers he was at before. They want to do more deals like Guendouzi, £8 million more, 20 million for 25 million for Tierney, 25 million for Saliba. That's the sort of deals they're looking at. So I think a few fans might find this window quite frustrating. I don't know. I mean, at the same time, if they qualify for the Champions League, there might be a view that we need that top quality midfielder, a guy that can dominate the game, and that they might pay a bit more money for him. But I think you should be expecting them to look at players that are younger, that aren't already established European stars, and then potentially that gets topped up with one real big money purchase every year. Finance is dependent. And obviously it all depends on Aubameyang and Lacazette as well.
So yeah, that brings so many questions. Well, first of all, about Aubameyang and Saka's contract deal. Do you think they will be signing? Should Arsenal fans be looking forward to that?
Everything I've been told with Saka is that there is confidence he will eventually sign. I think the view within Arsenal is they will eventually get Bukayo Saka to sign. I don't know when. I don't think it's guaranteed. Borussia Dortmund, I think, are the one club to really look out for here. I remember watching Saka in the under-23s, and Borussia Dortmund scouts were there. And they were there to see Saka. Aubameyang, so I kind of think that the challenge is a really tough one to reflect the nuance of in a newspaper, a back page or a newspaper. But the thing with Aubameyang is I don't really understand why it would be in his interest to sign a contract with Arsenal at the end of this season. Now, if a team like Barcelona or Real Madrid decide they want Aubameyang and Arsenal were willing to pay Arsenal £50 million, I think that deal might well get done. Aubameyang would be quite happy to go. The challenge for him is Barcelona and Real Madrid, as a rule now, are not signing players of Aubameyang's age. They would look at Aubameyang and say he's not much younger than Luis Suarez, or he's not much younger than Karim Benzema. We'd have to pay £50 million, £250,000 a week in wages, get to the end of that contract, and he's not worth anything. So financially, the big two in Spain, that's a tough call for them to make. If, however, Aubameyang at 32 were to be entering the market as a free agent, Real Madrid, Barcelona would look at him and go, assuming he stays at kind of roughly the level that he is, or declines kind of as you would expect, they'd look at him as a free agent and go, yes, we want him. And then all that money goes to Aubameyang. A sign-on clause. I mean, look at how much Aaron Ramsey earned. I mean, the actual salary is a bit overstated, but he is very well paid for what he does at Juventus. And I can't believe that Aubameyang will not be aware of this. The one to potentially look out for this summer is Inter Milan, if Lautaro Martinez were to go to Barcelona, which to me seems the most logical thing to happen. That Martinez goes to Barcelona, Inter look at Aubameyang, and for them it just makes a bit more sense. I don't know. I don't know Inter well enough to know whether they would think that kind of paying 40, 50 million pounds for Aubameyang is good business. And that would be my doubt with them as well. But that to me seems more logical. But I do think he's one that may just kind of think, do I run down my contract and see where I'm at, at some stage next season? He's really enjoying. The other thing is he's really enjoying playing under Arteta. He was very unhappy under Emery. I can say this with quite a bit of confidence. I think if Emery had stayed, Aubameyang, Torreira, Xhaka would all have gone. Sorry, just one moment. But Aubameyang and Xhaka would all have gone at the very least. It was sorry, lost my train of thought there a bit. But yeah, I think that helps a lot that he's happy. That he loves life in London as well. So there's all those little things to consider. But ultimately, I just don't see why it's in his interest to sign that contract.
And if he leaves, do you think what will happen for the front three? Will Arteta he just sticks with the attacking players that he has, brings Saka to the left, and then keeps playing Lacazette and Nketiah, and then hopefully by that time Tierney will be fit enough to fill the left back position? Or will they go out and find someone as his replacement for a wing player?
I don't know.
Left wing.
I don't know, honestly. I suspect they would. My suspicion would be that they would look at something more short term, while Saka and Martinelli establish themselves. From what I've been told, there's a sort of sense within Arsenal that maybe they asked a bit too much of the youngsters this season, put a bit too much pressure on them. Saka and Martinelli are probably the two best, and the one thing they won't want to do is sign someone that gets in their way. So, I mean, my suspicion would be that they then look at a loan deal for a year or two. Like, I'm not, this isn't reporting this as fact. What I know is that they will not do anything that harms the long-term progression of Saka and Martinelli. And I think Martinelli's the other one that could eventually succeed Lacazette as well. But yeah, I would think that they will. If Aubameyang went, it's a sort of lone player on the left. Apparently, Barcelona aren't too happy with Griezmann. Maybe it could be him. Guess, complete guess that. It could be him and that, but I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Okay. And so going back to midfield, if we have a new incoming player, assuming that it might happen, then what do you think would happen to Ceballos' deal? Would they keep him? Like the Xhaka-Ceballos partnership in the midfield, would that be something that we will see anymore or no?
Mikel Arteta said there hadn't been, a couple of weeks back, just before the season ended, he said there hadn't been any talks with Real Madrid, which I do understand was true. Like there hadn't been a proper conversation. And Real Madrid as well, for their part, they didn't really want to sell Ceballos last summer. Arsenal wanted to put a purchase option in that deal, and Real Madrid just said no. So I would factor that into any consideration that there wasn't a huge will from Real Madrid to sell him. Like you've got players like Martin Ødegaard, who I think is still on their books. I might be wrong there. Playing really well as well. So potentially that makes them a bit more willing to do a deal around Ceballos, but he's not cheap. It would be about 40 million euros from what I've heard. So the honest answer is I don't really know on that one as well, I'm afraid.
And so who would be your from your personal perspective, personal point of view, who would you like to see in that midfield if you were able to sign anyone?
Wilfred Ndidi at Leicester. I mean, I'm sure there are more experienced sort of high grade options there, but he is a really fantastic holding midfielder. I know we spoke. It always feels like the conversations with Arsenal come back to sort of needing someone that's big and strong, but Ndidi's got a bit more of that. He passes the ball really well, and he does have that energy and dynamism. And I think that you have someone like Torreira that can cover and that will run hard yards for you, but he just doesn't quite have the physicality against the sort of very best midfielders. It's always against teams like City where you just see him bounce off someone like Kevin De Bruyne, because when it's a player that's got a real blend of technique and physicality, I think potentially Torreira comes a bit short. So I'd go for Ndidi. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah,
I would. De Bruyne. Why not De Bruyne?
Yeah, I would like to see Ndidi in that midfield too. I think it would fit Arsenal's need a lot.
Mm.
And in terms of departures, will we be seeing a lot of them this summer?
There'll be a few. There will be a few that Arsenal they're not high-profile names. There will be a few players that Arsenal are looking to move on. So you've got Mkhitaryan, El Neni. I know these ones, the fans sort of know, and they kind of get a bit frustrated when you tell them that. Ozil, I don't think will go. I think if he could find a situation that he wanted elsewhere, Arsenal would be happy to let him go, but I don't really see that happening. In defence, My suspicion is that one of Socrates or Mustafi will go. There's an argument which I kind of made in a piece over the weekend that you sell high on Mustafi. But I remember talking to Socrates a few weeks ago about his future, and it was quite surprising how, the impression he'd always given was he was sort of here to sign his contract and then he'd move on. He'd play his 3 years and move on. But I think if he kind of finds himself more on the fringes, he would look to go somewhere else. He's been quite clear about that. So I think one of Socrates or Mustafi, potentially both, but at the very least one of them will move on as well. But there's no big name players that Arsenal, to my knowledge, are actively trying to push out of the door. I think there are others they will kind of consider deals for, but there's not a huge number of players that are really being told it's time to go.
Yeah. And now that we've talked about the defense too, do you think Upamecano will be something that Arsenal can do? No?
Definitely not. It's like the sort of player it's what I was saying earlier. I mean, Arsenal really like Upamecano, but
yeah,
so do other clubs. So do other clubs. So do Barcelona, apparently. And what do Arsenal have to offer that Barcelona don't? Plus a load of other things. I'd love to be proven wrong. I don't think it will happen. There is genuine interest there. So, I mean, I didn't think that Nicolas Pepe was one that they could get. And I was told by people within Arsenal, which will make me very suspicious if they tell me the same thing about Upamecano. But I don't see it happening anymore. I think that ship has sailed. Probably.
Yeah, when you were talking about how these players go to Germany and then from there it will be really difficult, I was thinking of him and how when the deal did not happen last year, I was like, it's done.
In Arsenal's defence, they had to make a call there between a winger and a defender, and obviously they didn't really expect Laurent Koscielny to go in the way he did. So that kind of changed how they had to approach things at the back. And they got Saliba as well. So, I mean, potentially, I don't really think it could have happened even last summer. I just think is one of those players that Arsenal fans get very excited about, but that really it was never as likely as people might have liked.
Yeah. And so you mentioned Koscielny. I wanted to talk about the captaincy saga at Arsenal too. It's been crazy in the past, I don't know, ever since Thierry Henry has left.
Before then?
Yeah. We had Koscielny leaving like that in the summer, Van Persie, Fabregas. I don't know if you remember anyone else. We've never had a stable. And then we had Saka recently, right? So all these different players and Arsenal's captaincy, and now Aubameyang, he might be leaving. Do you see anyone standing up, stepping up and taking that role and then leading the team, and someone who would be a viable option in this current squad?
So Hector Bellerin is the obvious name here. I do think there's more to him than maybe his detractors think, just as an individual. Something that's kind of not been reported very much. He's been on the sort of Arsenal Leadership Council since Arsene Wenger's time. Back then, it wasn't quite sort of formal as it was with Emery, but under Wenger, he was kind of one of a sort of quartet. It was basically the back four as you would know it. So Mertesacker, Koscielny, Bellerin, and Monreal were kind of a quartet of dressing room advisors that Wenger had. Also, he's someone that has, unlike others, he's kind of rejected the chance to go elsewhere to play for Arsenal. PSG, when Emery was in charge, tried to sign him. Obviously, we know about Barcelona as well. All that kind of makes me think at least there's something there about that he is a captain that values Arsenal. I know that obviously players like Fabregas, Arsenal means an enormous amount to them, but I think the way in which the captaincy has been handled and this goes right back to Wenger, it goes back to Henry, and arguably even a little. I mean, yeah, but Henry would be the main one. it's just been something that you give to someone to beg them not to leave you. A gift to sort of say, please don't ditch us. There's a really good book by Sam Walker of the Wall Street Journal, which I know that, interestingly, before he left, Ivan Gazidis was very keenly aware of, which talks about how the one thing that unites the great teams in sport is captaincy and having great leadership. And Arsenal just almost the complete opposite. I mean, I remember a press conference when Arsene Wenger was asked in the game before he hadn't had he had a captain for the second half, and he realised he hadn't. Look, it's not the be all and end all, but there's just this void of leadership. And when you see a team that kind of folds under pressure, that looks so mentally weak, how can you not put those two together and see the common link there? Xhaka, I think, could also have been a really good captain for Arsenal. I think a lot of I remember people would always say to me, particularly before Arteta came, you just don't, people within Arsenal, I remember saying, you don't see what it is that makes Xhaka so good. That means he always starts. I think a lot of that is about the stuff off the pitch. Always the hardest training player as well at the club, a model professional, and those sort of things matter as well in terms of captaincy. I don't think he could have it back. I think he even kind of came out and said he wouldn't feel comfortable wearing it anymore, which I think is perfectly understandable. Beyond that, I don't see many of the other squad that are captain material to me. Maybe Guendouzi, if he can get his head down. I really like how he bends the rules a little bit. I think that's actually something I'd like to see in a captain, someone that knows where the line is and isn't kind of afraid to step over it. But I mean, Aubameyang is great with the young players. He's really, got a paternal role almost with them. But he's not an Arsenal club captain. He's not a club captain of any team because it's just not. It's not who he is. It's not in his nature to be that sort of person issuing the rallying cry. He's a leader, but he's not a captain, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do agree that the role, the meaning of the captaincy role has changed within the club. And as you just truly mentioned, it's just for begging people to stay, which is not the best way to handle it. Yeah. So about Bellerin and him and Holding, they've been playing on and off. Bellerin had some more time to play, but Holding has been off even the game squads for a while now. And they have huge talents, both of them. And I think Arsenal fans, we were really excited about them two coming back after their injuries and then becoming integrated in the squad and helping the team. Do you think they can become an integral part of the team any soon or even ever, especially with Holding?
I can. Holding, I think the best thing for Holding right now would be something like what Callum Chambers did at Fulham alone next season. So he's playing week in, week out. Almost in a way, going to a team like Fulham is better as well because you kind of have to defend a lot, and Chambers came back and he was a really good defender. Because saw that Fulham team were dreadful. He was asked to do an awful lot of defending. Bellerin, I think he will be there. He just needs a full pre-season. He's been playing through injuries. I mean, there's he got a lot of criticism just before the COVID-19 break, for want of a better term. But he was playing with another injury. He's going to keep picking those up whilst he's still kind of getting back to full strength in his knee and things like that. I think so. I mean, I would say with Bellerin, I think it's highly likely that he will be a regular part of the Arsenal team for as long as he kind of wants to be. Holding, maybe it's third choice centre back long term, but he's someone I would not be giving up on just because of this injury. He's a fantastic defender.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the toll on the youngsters this season, but we've seen them playing very well, especially the academy players. We have Saka, Nelson, especially in the last couple of games before the break, and then Willock on and off. Do you know, or can you let the Arsenal fans know of any other academy players that they should be looking forward to?
well, these are the best ones. There's not quite the same group bubbling away under the surface as there is that have just come through. I'm sure a lot of Arsenal fans will be familiar with Tyrese John-Jules. He's a really talented striker who's just a little bit more versatile, maybe even than Nketiah and following Balogun. He can just do a little bit more. He's more technically adept. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's about as quick as well. I think he's probably of the three. I think he might be the one that goes the furthest, just in terms of having that adaptability. He could play in a 2. He can play in a 1 and also function as a target man. The other one to really keep an eye on is Miguel Aziz, midfielder. You can't miss him. He's got big dreadlocks kind of bunched up in a ponytail when he plays. Quite different to a lot of the sort of players that Arsenal have produced so far, in that he's more of a deep-lying creator rather than a number 10 or a winger. He's someone that likes to pick the ball up from deep. So in terms of academy prospects, I'd say they're the two. Katalin Kiyan as well, Romanian, who joined in the summer. I know Upamecano has been really impressed with him and the rest of the academy staff. He is more of a natural number 10. Those would be the three. There are always really talented players around, though, and I think maybe that this particular generation will make Arsenal fans feel that's the norm, but it's never going to be quite like, or it's certainly not for a long time, is it going to be quite like that. But there's a real commitment to blooding them. I mean, Arsenal talk about it as one new academy player in the squad every 2 years, ideally one every season. And that's the commitment. And that's a big part of Edu's job as well. Edu, Ljungberg and Saka, they've all got to kind of make sure that pathway's there. Edu will be putting pressure on Arteta to give these players minutes. Not that I think Arteta needs that pressure.
Mm-hmm. And so my other question about Arsenal's academy is that at least I don't remember in recent years that Arsenal have had a centre back, mm-hmm. a CB coming from their academy. Mm-hmm. Why is that? I mean, can we look forward to that with Mertesacker that now leading the academy, or is it just the quality of academies that they don't produce those CVs?
Yeah, it's just reflective of the Arsenal academy. It's reflective of the coaches, the youth scouts, that it just isn't kind of what they produce. And actually, I don't really think there are that many English academies that do produce top quality central defenders. If you look at them, a lot of them tend to kind of come up through the lower leagues. You've got someone like Joe Gomez. He's not a Liverpool, we think of him as Liverpool. He's a Charlton Academy product. I mean, the other really good one, I think, Ben Wilmot, who is on Watford's books, is out on loan. Again, I think he came, I can't remember where, but he's come through lower league football. Tyrone Mings. I just think that's kind of, you have to be a centre-back, you're going to flower a bit later. It generally works a bit better to work your way through, League One, League Two, the Championship, rather than academy football for young defenders is just a waste of time.
Yeah, I see that. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the other London teams. Mm-hmm. Just how would you see Mourinho's time at Tottenham? Do you think that if they don't do a coup at the squad, like bring in new players, sell some of the current squad, will he be successful?
No, not really. I think Pochettino got more out of that squad than I think that squad was necessarily capable of. I mean, you look at the sort of the options in central midfield since Moussa Dembele has been on the wane have not been very good. I think Harry Winks is a good player, but Eriksen often was their best natural central midfielder. I really like Lo Celso, but I think it's already got to the stage where Spurs are too reliant on him. Right back, they need improving. Left back, they need improving. The centre backs are a bit dodgy. I think actually this isn't necessarily a spell that's going to be reflective of Mourinho having lost it so much as it should just serve as a reminder of how good Pochettino was to get that much out of that squad. He will. I'm sure he will want a big overhaul. He'll want to bring in experienced players. That's also not how Tottenham, as far as I'm aware, and I'm not, I don't know as much about Tottenham as about Arsenal. I don't really think that's how they plan to proceed for the future. They won't be, if he says to them, I want to sign Nemanja Matic, obviously they won't. Matic just signed a contract extension. But if he says that, Tottenham would turn around and go, that's not really the sort of player we want to buy here. Jose, got players like Ryan Sessegnon, that's where they want to invest their money. I don't think it's a great stylistic fit, cultural fit between the two. I don't see it lasting. I don't even think he'll get to his third season, to be honest.
Okay. So you think the overhaul will not happen?
I think there will be. I don't think we ever really seen huge overhauls in the space of a season. And if we do, we see them at teams like Man City, who have a lot of money. And who knows what will happen with them. Tottenham, the money's not quite there. There is money to spend, but they spent like 240 million in the last year. It's kind of happening incrementally. I don't think that we'll kind of wake up one morning and it will be like 5 players have gone, 4 have arrived. I think it will happen slowly over a number of years. I don't know if Mourinho, though, is the man to see that through.
Mm-hmm. And just one last question about Chelsea. Do you feel like the management there will give enough time for Frank Lampard to adapt to his new role?
Yes. Lampard is one of the few managers that come in and, it's they have that sort of cachet with the Chelsea fans. Frank Lampard is a Chelsea icon. He will always have the backing of the fans, and that is always a huge part of it. I think also a lot of these Chelsea young players look up to him. And I remember when Lampard took over, I think the expectation was that Chelsea probably wouldn't make the Champions League, the top 4. Particularly with so few, with the only player that they could sign being Kovacic and the rest being young players. I think from what I've heard, they're very impressed with the work he's done. It could be better, but then you look at the summer. If you could add Ben Chilwell to that squad, if you could add Sancho to that squad, maybe one sort of grade A striker to compete with Abraham. I think that there's such a fantastic young core there, and I think Lampard is probably the one person who I would trust to bring it out.
Great, thank you so much, James. I really enjoyed our talk. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you back on the pod again soon.
Be delighted to. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you so much.